Chris. How are you?
I'm fine, Christian. How are you doing? And thank you for the invite. As always, I am pleased to be talking in front of such a large audience of experts in the field. So, just to give you some notes on me, my last name is Mayo, although I have nothing to do with the Mayo Clinic. Although the ultimate kind of founder of the Mayo Clinic is a guy called William Worrell Mayo, who emigrated from Salford, which is a suburb of Manchester, which is my hometown. Actually, I'm from Salford in the 1860s. So I probably am related to him, strangely enough. Despite my accent and the fact that I work for the London Stock Exchange, I've been working in US capital markets for 20 plus years. And so you should check out my LinkedIn. I write a lot about capital markets and a lot about US capital markets and quite a bit about biotech, life sciences, and healthcare, even though I am a generalist by background. So what do? I help US companies IPO in London, and for the most part, on the healthcare side of things, that's everything outside of biopharma. So as an example, I've got a medtech company at the moment from California that's doing a $50 million raise, a couple $100 million market cap on AMR growth market, and I can explain why that is if anyone's interested. But I would say that the UK has been quite a good market for areas outside of biopharma, but relatively weak for biopharma itself. And I think that's because we have a predominantly generalist investor base. The US has a much larger stable of specialists who really support biotech deals and really backstop them essentially. And so, moving on to the conversation about what's happening in the IPOs in the US, I just want to echo what Anne and also what Dan has said before. It's been a pretty tough market. The last couple of IPOs that have happened have performed poorly. They were tightly allocated and traded really poorly afterwards, actually, which is something you don't want to see when you've done such a tight allocation on relative and also on relatively low volumes as well. What we did see though in Q1 was the best financing kind of numbers for biotech in the last 5 years, and that was almost exclusively driven by tight financing. So in the US, you've got a weird situation right now where you've got a lot of public companies, but essentially they're being privately funded, not funded by regular investors in the public market. And that, I think a lot of that is driven, again, Dan was talking about this, around about yields and expectations around where interest rates are going. If you plotted a graph between the XBI and Treasury yields, you'll see there's an inverse relationship that's very clear. And so as the can has been kicked down the road with regards to interest rate reductions this year, so that has stalled the kind of rally that you would have hoped to have seen in biotech stocks. So that has been the thing that's been holding the market back. On the UK, as I came onto this call, I understand that Rishi Sunak has called the general elections for July the 4th in the UK. So we'll see how that affects the UK IPO market. But it also just shows you that British people like to ignore the fact that July the 4th exists as a holiday. Obviously, maybe it's a sore subject for us. But we'll see. Obviously, you've got the UK elections, political risk. The US clearly has political risk, and whoever wins that election will have an impact on the pharma sector in specifically. So we have to see what happens with that. So, there is hope for recovery, certainly in biopharma IPOs towards the end of the year. But the question is, will that be able to front run any election? I think it really depends how, things are looking from a, kind of a poll perspective, and also what the numbers look like from an inflation perspective as well. So, those are my kind of high level comments, but it's been quite an interesting year so far.
Well, Chris, since you guys scheduled something on the 4th of July, as you call it, which I love the way you say July, I'm going to ask a tough question because you could bring outsider perspective.
Yeah.
What happens if Trump wins? What happens if Biden wins? Is there going to be a different reaction in the US?
Well, I think the view would be that, with Trump, you don't know because with the Republican winning, you would expect that to be good for biopharma, for the pharma industry because there'll be less pressure from a pricing perspective, you would think, right? But Trump is just a wild card. If he sees there is an opportunity to make political capital out of something, and people are making a lot of noise, say, around drug pricing and reimbursement and things like that, he could just decide that'll be one of his top, his subjects to focus on. So that's why it's just different than it usually would be, I think. So let's see. I'll be honest. Even though I've lived here for nearly 20, most of the last 25 years, I'm not an expert on US politics. So, and maybe I'll leave that.
Well,
I'll leave that to the Americans on the call.
I was happy to put you on the spot and let us off. We won't probably address that again, but thanks for making us think about it. It was a good perspective. Chris is an excellent follow on LinkedIn. His articles are meaningful. He breaks down the U.S. market along with the European markets and talks about the dynamics. So please follow Chris and comment and share his articles. He spends a lot of time and works very hard on that. Thank you, Chris.